Gino's East is one of Chicago's most famous deep dish pizza places. They've been open since 1966. And there are still some people who don't realize Gino's East is here in LA now too. And let me tell you, it feels like you're in Chicago when you're in there. I know, I'm in there a lot. And during the week, Gino's has a happy hour from 3 to 6, Monday through Thursday. Get $5 drinks like Stella and Dark Horse Chardonnay. Also, $6 eats like spinach artichoke dip, garlic breadsticks, and a jumbo bowl of fries. There's so much great stuff on the menu. I always have a difficult time deciding what to order at Gino's. My go-to is probably the tavern pizza, cheese and sausage. You know what? Everything is my go-to there. Deep dish, the Italian beef, you name it. Everything on that menu is fantastic. Gino's East of Chicago and Los Angeles was named Best Pizza in the Southland by LA Times readers 2 years in a row. It's more than just a Chicago restaurant. It's one of the best restaurants in LA. Check out the friendly confines of Gino's East LA today on the corner of Coldwater Canyon and Riverside Drive, just off the 101. See you there.
Sit back and relax. It's time for peanuts, popcorn, and Cracker Jacks.
Hey, how's it going? I'm your host, Jeff Santo, and I'm here with my wife, Christie.
Hello.
Pete Rose passed away.
I know.
He was the Babe Ruth of base hits. That guy was Mr. Baseball. For the people who saw him play, there wasn't a guy more dialed in. He would literally watch the ball into the catcher's glove when he would take a pitch. And he would physically almost move. He would like turn his head and then, okay, it's not a strike. I knew it wasn't a strike. And he was a winner. You got to give him, like, he hustled more than anyone. You could just see that he loved playing baseball, right?
Yeah.
And there was a time when my dad retired. He took me to a game. We just went to a game one day. He said, "Hey, I'm going downtown. You want to come to a game?" I'm like, yeah, I'll go to a game. I was in high school. I think I was a freshman or something. And we got these front row tickets right on the on-deck circle of the visiting team. And the Cubs were playing the Phillies, and Pete Rose was on the Phillies at the time.
Okay, hold on a second. I want to hear this story. But you're saying that you went to a game with your dad,
Yes.
and the Cubs sat your dad on the visiting side?
Hey, I don't know where he got the tickets from. Probably didn't get them from the Cubs. Probably got them from a guy who had front row on the visiting side. I'm glad we were on the visiting side. I got to see Pete Rose come out of the dugout. So this is what I'm talking about. Okay. So Pete Rose comes out of the dugout, which was so cool. Is he had a bandage on his wrist, and as soon as he came out of the dugout, he looked at my dad and he pointed. He goes, "I got a bad wrist."
Like, making excuses already.
Just to tell like a former player, like, I got a bad wrist. Oh yeah, but I'm playing, man. Just it felt cool. My dad gave the nod. And he said, it was just a cool gesture that a respectful gesture that he gave to my dad, and then he got a base hit right with a bad wrist. But the guy, man, on the baseball field, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Everyone knows that. Okay, but he lied about gambling on his team, and he could have come clean. If he did, he's in the Hall of Fame, but he didn't, and he kept that lie up. And the commissioner at the time was Bart Giamatti, who was a very respected commissioner.
That's Paul Giamatti's dad.
Yeah, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the actor. Yeah, great actor. And he even had an out. I mean, Giamatti said, you admit that that you gambled. We'll put a sentence down on you, but it won't be a lifetime ban, that's for sure. But he wouldn't. So he signed a lifetime ban, and thinking that, basically he was going to get out of it one day. And Giamatti passed away, and maybe he thought he was going to get in once Giamatti passed away, but little did he know that Giamatti had a lot of respect, and that even made it worse for Rose, because he was blatant all the way until later in his life. I don't know the year he came out and admitted that he did lie. And it just wasn't good enough, man. There's a character clause. And I feel this about Pete Rose. He was such a great player, like Babe Ruth, right? But off the field, though, everyone knew, he was a rabble rouser. I don't know what you call it. Whatever. He liked to have fun, and he was a character. But he wasn't someone that the reason Babe Ruth never managed is because of that. He was the word incorrigible, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, and Babe Ruth wanted to manage, but no one gave him that job. And I think Pete Rose was in the same realm of that. Like,
would you say he was a good manager?
He's a baseball guy. Yeah, I mean, he did all right, but to give him the reins and not have someone make sure that, he's not effing up out off the field or in the dugout and doing stuff that he shouldn't be doing. I mean, Billy Martin was similar, but he had George Steinbrenner looking over him. I feel that Rose needed to have someone watch him. It just he wasn't cut out to be in charge, have that big of a responsibility. Better player than a manager, because there's more to a manager than just getting wins. You know what I mean? But so I feel that now that he's passed away and we've all know what kind of ball player he was, and we all know what he went through, after he retired, and it was miserable to see, but he served his life sentence. Now he deserves to be in because it's over. It's a lifetime ban. It's not a dead time ban.
Yeah. So, well, it would be interesting to see when that occurs,
Yeah.
Will they put him on the next ballot? Will they wait a few years?
I think they should just, I don't know how that will work. Maybe they'll have a new rule or something. And which gets me to, got a great special guest today, Sharon Pannozzo. God, she worked with the Cubs for almost 3 decades, and she was the boss of public relations. She was director of media, and my crackerjack is David Gue. He wrote this book called The Baseball Hall of Fame: A Fan's Perspective. Just came out, but he's going to be on. I'm going to give him a crackerjack call and talk about his new book. It's fascinating.
Awesome.
It's going to be a cool show.
Enjoy.
Have you ever wondered how cool it would be to experience the life of a big league ball player? Well, at Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp, you'll enjoy the week of a lifetime, playing ball on pro-quality fields, being coached by and sharing a clubhouse with Cub legends including Fergie Jenkins, Jody Davis, Bob Denier, Sean Dunston, and Lee Smith. Imagine your first day at the camp at Northside. You enter into the clubhouse and see your locker with your nameplate and personalized home and away Cub uniforms, and then you see that one of your Cubs heroes has a locker right next to yours. No longer a fantasy. Your Cubs career is about to get real. At Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp, you'll stay in top-shelf accommodations and compete in a 10-game season that includes a playoff to determine the camp champions. My brother and I were on a couple of camp championship teams, and it got intense. It was great competition. And you'll have services of a professional training staff, and you'll need it, that's for sure. Plus a clubhouse attendant like the big leagues have. Picture yourself towing the rubber, facing Ron Santo or Willie Wilson or Ron Coomer. Yeah, that's right. And when you're in the batter's box, you better get ready to take some hacks against big league arms like Mike Remlinger, Ray Burris, and Tim Stoddard. Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp is run by veterans of Randy Huntley's Fantasy Camp. Randy's a legend and will always be remembered for this gift he gave to baseball fans, to all of us. His legacy is in good hands. Northside Camp runs January 26th to February 2nd, 2025 in Tucson, Arizona. Roster spots are limited, so grab yours today. Go to wavelandevents.com. That's wavelandevents.com and click on Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp link for more information and to register. You can also follow Northside Baseball Fantasy Camp on Facebook. Sign up now. My special guest today is a pioneer in sports management. She opened up her own doors when the doors were basically locked. She was the first intern ever for the Boston Red Sox. She quickly impressed the scouts and upper management and found herself on the north side of Chicago with the Chicago Cubs, starting out as a PR assistant in her 20s and quickly elevating to the top position as the director of media relations. Working for over 2 decades with the Cubs, she was voted one of the top female executives in Chicago. You might have seen her in This Old Cub when she had the difficult job of calling my dad and telling him he wasn't going to the Hall. Sharon Pannozzo, it's so cool to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Jeff, I'm so excited to just spend some time with you,
Right?
Well, decades.
Yeah. God, man. I got to tell you,
time.
the first thing I got to ask you, okay, is a baseball stat for you. How many baseball games have you been to in your baseball media relations career?
Well, I tried to figure that out. I mean, I'm sure it's, I was in baseball for 24 years. I would say at least 20 of those years I watched, the whole season plus spring training. So you're looking at approximately 200 games,
Yeah.
right? And then those other 4 years I didn't travel with the team, and maybe I didn't necessarily watch the game when the team was on the road, but usually you did, right? You wanted to
Right.
know what the score was. So I guess if you did the math, you'd come up with a pretty big number. I sat through a lot of games. I sat through a lot of rain delays,
Right.
you know, extra innings. I always kind of joke someday when I go meet St. Peter at the pearly gates, I want to see if maybe he'll like send me back and I can get credit for innings and rain delays.
Yeah.
So I could get a couple extra years out of that.
That's hilarious. That's
Yeah.
so true. And did you ever have a day off? Seriously.
It's kind of funny. You never really thought about it because it was like your life,
Your life.
right?
Yeah.
And your dad, and it wasn't like, that saying that if you do what you love, you're never going to work a day in your life because it's just your life, right?
It's your life, totally.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure, for you guys, your
Mhm.
family, it wasn't, I mean, it was a job, certainly, but it never felt like a job. It was like almost like a vocation. You were blessed to be able to go to Wrigley Field, and that was your office for the day, and somebody's paying you to watch a baseball game. I mean, I think the challenging part of that was, there's a lot of lean years in that
Yeah.
window of time I was there. So you're watching a lot of not maybe so good baseball, but you're still in this hallowed, beautiful ballpark. And, you walk out onto that field on any given day and it's, you feel blessed.
Yeah. It is. It becomes your life. There's no doubt. That kind of job that you had was all consuming, but it changes every day, right? I mean, there's always something new happening. And when I was able to travel with the team for this old Cub in 2003, I got to see you work. I got to see the environment. Man, you had like a no nonsense way about you. You had a cool style. Now, did you come up with that? Did you build that, or was like you going in the time that you went in, you had to be like, okay, I just got to be focused, my head down, and go.
Well, there weren't a lot of women when I started.
Right.
So, you sort of had to come up with I guess, a strategy of how you were going to approach things. And, I never wore a dress. That's simple as that. I always wore pants, and at some point for like maybe the last, I don't know, I got access to the clubhouse probably a little bit before I took over the department. So that would have been around 1990, maybe a little earlier than that, because they were letting female media into the clubhouse, right? Starting in the late 70s. But it was, are we letting our front office women in the clubhouse?
Right.
That was a whole other, hurdle. And so, and then I ended up like, by the time I got to like people like Jim Riggleman and, and Don Baylor and Dusty Baker, they put me in charge of managing the clubhouse from a security perspective.
Wow.
Like coming and going. So I spent a lot of time in the clubhouse.
Yeah.
Actually ate 3 meals a day in the clubhouse.
Wow. Yeah. No, I always, you were always around and moving, man. And starting from spring training. And it was great to see. I mean, and you were talking about, I heard that when you started, you weren't able, like you're talking, it took you a while to get in the clubhouse, but you weren't able to be on a bus, right? Don Zimmer did he keep you off the bus? In a
Yeah,
respectful way, right? Not a mean way.
in a very respectful
Yeah.
way. I mean, again, that goes to your approach. Um, he didn't want women on the bus, and he felt that, that for my personal safety, I might hear things that were not appropriate, and very gentlemanly like, but
Hmm.
understanding I still have a job to do and I'm traveling with the team, and it's very inconvenient that the traveling secretary has to book a taxi for me to ride behind the bus, right?
Wow.
And that was very inconvenient. And also, like, now you're singling me out, right?
Yeah.
Now everybody knows, and the players were awesome. Most of the players, they thought it was like, Sharon, you belong on the bus, right? Because it was, once people see that you're doing a job, you're not there as a fan, or, they see that, how hard you're working for them,
Right.
right? Because that's what we're all working for. We're working for the team. They understood that I was there to do a job, and I did a good job for them. So the players were very supportive. But again, I had a couple of coaches that were kind of old school as well. And that's really what it was. It was
Yeah.
old school. And then it was something they just needed to get used to. And they did, you
When did
know.
when did it break off? Like what was the transition? How did it happen?
I think we were in Montreal.
Okay.
Uh, And it was one of those things that in Montreal they have a curfew at the airport, and we had a rain delay, and by the time we got to the airport was closed. They weren't going to be able to, get a taxi for me, and so it was just like, okay, Sharon, you can ride the bus, sit up front, don't say anything, keep your head down. And that's what I did. And after that, I just was like, you know what? I'm going to just keep doing this until somebody tells me not to do it. And quite frankly, the traveling secretary back then, this was an extra burden on him. He's got so much to do on getaway day. The last
Yeah.
thing he wants to do is, oh, I got to get the PR person a taxi to the airport. And so,
Right.
I just kind of sat on the bus and nobody said anything. So I just, again, kept my head down, sat in the front row.
God, so you were basically right there. You were changing things. Yeah, I mean, because if the Cubs are doing that, the whole league's doing that, correct?
Well, there weren't any other women. So there was one other.
So there you go. So there you go.
There was one other woman. She was with the Atlanta Braves, and she had some issues. Chuck Tanner was the manager at the time, and her approach was a more aggressive approach. She didn't like the idea that she was being treated
Mm,
differently, and which I don't blame her. But she ended up, as I recall, there's an organization, National Organization for Women, maybe. I think she went to them to get some support and help. And at the end of the day, you're trying to change a culture, and my strategy was just kind of keep your head down, do a great job, and keep moving forward. And it ended up working for me.
but sure did.
Her strategy didn't exactly work for her. She ended up leaving the game, but she went on to another successful career. And it just, her style at the time just wasn't the right fit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
People like Chuck Tanner, Don Zimmer, these are old school baseball
Oh
people,
yeah.
right?
Right.
And so change is difficult. Change is difficult all the time for
Yeah.
people. So
Absolute 100%. And
I,
that's your style though, obviously, because you just said it. Your head down, just mind your own business, do the job. And they're like, wow, she's doing the job. There's no problems here. Her ears are shut. Whatever. They knew that you were part of the team. You're not going to go outside here.
at
So
the end of the day, I probably had, I mean, you're in that environment, I'm like, oh, I talk like a truck driver, but that's just because that's where you are, right? You just
right.
kind of assimilate what's around you. And I was like, oh God. And then I went to work in television, and then, people have kind of a different style. And it was like, oh yeah, I guess I gotta clean up my act.
Oh wow, that's wow. Because I just thought it was great. I just said, boy, you are focused, but you were also. It wasn't like you were in a rush anywhere, right? It was just you were focused, and if I had to say, hey, something to you about my dad, you stopped, you handled it, and you were off again.
Yeah. Well,
So,
your dad was a special guy. He was a
yeah.
special guy to everybody, but he always had a spot in my heart.
Mm, yeah.
You
Well,
know.
since we're right there, because I want to get into your parents, but that call that you made, I never asked you this. What was that like for you?
Well, it was heartbreaking. We all were so hopeful. We thought that was it, right? And
Yeah.
the media at the time was, you're kind of like looking to see what the overall like senses, and the media seemed to be positive. And I remember telling him, if I'm the one calling you, it's not good news.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
You do not want to hear from me because the way that it was set up with the Hall of Fame, the president of the Hall of Fame called you if you got in, and the lowly PR director had the,
Yeah.
kind of dirty job of calling you if you didn't. And so unfortunately, that fell on me, and it was very difficult. And I also knew that because it was such a, everybody was thinking so positive, that there was a TV crew,
hmm
and, there's now it's, you don't get a chance to sort of grieve in private that it didn't happen. You've got all these people around you that are hoping for a celebration and, to record it for posterity. And instead, you're getting me and hearing me in the background.
Yeah, but I got to tell you, it was very powerful that moment for this old cub. I have to say, um, in the story, because you got to see my dad's like really like character there, of
Yeah.
up
Oh,
against the wall and wanting to like, because we were all there waiting for the call, and then once your voice came on and your first thing was you said I'm sorry, because he just knew the voice was going to be you. It's not good, and just the way both of you handled it, and then you even had to ask a hard question because people were at the park that wanted to talk to him too, not that weren't at his house, and you had to ask that very difficult question: can you come to the park eventually and talk, or can the reporters come to your house from the park? And boy, man, he said, "Yeah, send him over." And both just such truth on like both of your sides, and it was just pretty powerful,
yeah. Well, your dad handled so much adversity with dignity throughout his life. And
right?
so that's just another moment, right? And
Yep.
I do believe he knows. He knows somewhere that it all happened,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah. Just he wasn't going to be here for it, but that was kind of who he was, man. And he wore it. He wore it. He didn't back away from it. So you got to love that, man. And he was that kind of guy. And you have that work ethic too. Now, did you get that from your mom or your dad? Tell me about your parents.
Well, I'm the oldest of kids in an Italian Irish Catholic family.
Right?
So my dad was a fireman in
Wow.
Massachusetts in a small town, and we all had to work. We all worked hard. We all worked when we were, young, and that's just how it was. And um, you know, the funny thing is, it's like now that sort of my career is in a different phase, and that's not by choice, that I'm not as I love being in the center of things, right?
Right.
And so I live out in Arizona where it's much quieter.
Right, right.
And you have, which was a lifestyle decision. And I ride horses and I hike all over the place, and I have my own business, and so I basically take on as many clients as I feel like I want to handle at a given time. But it's still not the same because I just worked the Boston Film Festival for a
Mm,
week.
okay.
And yeah, so, and I've actually worked with them for the last couple of months, getting the festival ready, selecting the films, that whole process,
Right.
working with filmmakers like
Yeah.
yourself. And it was like, and you know how the business is. Every day there's some sort of crisis for somebody, right?
Yeah.
This, and it was just like, I haven't had that level of engagement, and like, I love a good crisis, you know.
Right, right.
And that's
Thrive in
just
that.
me, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
like, look, I worked in Wrigley Field, which is like, to me, like the center of the universe. Then I got to work at 30 Rock in New York when I was with NBC, and I worked for
Wow.
Saturday Night Live, which
Yep.
was always like, whoa, what's wrong today? There's something, and so you get used to that like energy, right? And it's like I feed off that energy. And out here, I'm in this oasis of, well, heat right now, but it's just like such a peaceful place when you look at the mountains and all that. And then I'm just like, God, I'm bored.
Yeah, yeah. Well, then that means something's coming for you, right? Because you're feeling it. So, well, we'll see what's next there. Now let me ask you this: when you say you had a pretty big family, how many siblings?
I'm the oldest of six.
Okay.
And
So
then, ironically or randomly or however you look at it, one of my sisters, um, I did an internship with the Boston Red Sox. And from there, like, I think it was maybe 5 months later, I got right place, right time, got lucky, got an opportunity with the Cubs. A year after that, or 2 years after that, um, my sister, one of my younger sisters, got an internship with the Red Sox,
really?
and they hired her. So she worked there for, I don't know, 15 years before she left, and then she went to work in the film industry in Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
So,
So she was in PR with the Red Sox?
well, she did an internship in PR, but then she ended up doing more of the like on-field promotions,
Oh, okay.
anthem to singers,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But I always
Okay.
joke, they said they liked me, but they never hired me. Then she comes along and they hire her.
Now was your dad a baseball guy, a sports guy?
Oh yeah, my dad loved baseball. I mean, he was a Red Sox guy, right?
Yeah, of course.
Loved the Red Sox, but I turned him into a Cub fan.
Oh,
They would
cool.
they would get in their car, drive out. Well, first of all, they would come out to spring training. My first spring training was 1984,
Oh, what a
and they
year.
came oh my God.
God.
And they came out and spent a month with me in spring training because by that time my dad was retired. And then they came out every year to the ballpark. I mean, my dad didn't miss a year. And then he also used to pick, like we'd go up to Montreal. He would drive up from Massachusetts to Montreal to
Oh,
go to the
so
game.
cool.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, he would just, he just loved it. Spring training, I would give him a press pass.
Well, I would hope so.
Well, I mean, probably not appropriate for me to be
Oh,
giving my
come on. How many other people got
credentials,
press? Come, no, no,
but
no. That's appropriate one.
my dad got one. My dad got one,
Yeah.
and he would go down spring training to the other ballparks, go to the other
Oh,
games.
that's great.
Oh yeah, he loved it. He loved it.
Now,
Yeah.
why did you pick baseball? Was that your sport?
No, not really. I loved football, but I tried to get an internship in football, and once again, as a female, that was not working to my advantage. And I got an offer from the Buffalo Bills because I was a big football fan. And back in the day, I loved, was it
What-
OJ and was Jim Braxton was the
Yeah,
full.
no, but you're talking when Jim Kelly came around, but that's
Well,
the
this was
80s.
way before that. We're
You're
talking
talking 70s. You're talking, yeah, OJ. Yeah,
80.
yeah,
We're talking like 82, like even before then. And I was just a fan.
yeah.
And so, um,
But you're
so
talking when you liked them, when you watched them in the 70s. Yeah, I got
yeah,
you. Yeah.
yeah. And then, so I got the internship. It was for training camp, and they trained at a local college up there. And, and then I get this letter from them because that was before email, cell phones, or any of
Right.
that. I got a letter saying, unfortunately, we're going to have to rescind the offer because there's a second intern and you guys have to share a room and it's a guy. So we don't have a separate room for you. So unfortunately, we can't accommodate you for the internship. And so that was like,
Oh,
you
wow.
know, but that all important word pivot.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? And I had been working in the sports information office at UMass, where I went to undergraduate, and the SID there, who I had worked for 4 years, goes, well, I'm friends with the PR director of the Red Sox, and I'm like, what? Why didn't I know that before? And he's like, I'm going to introduce you to him. And I drove down to Boston. I sat in his office. Great guy, Dick Bresciani. What a class act.
Great
And
name. Yeah.
he'd been there for years. and they'd never had an intern, like not any interns. Internships hadn't even like begun
Begun.
yet.
No, you're right.
And he was just like, okay, we'll figure something out. You can start after the holidays in January. And so I was there from January to May, and you know, what an amazing experience because it was still owned by the Yawkey family, right? So you had that different feel about it. Still, Ted Williams is walking the halls, and
Right.
it's just
Right.
a
Oh,
real
yeah.
cool, different environment. And plus, look at you're at Fenway Park.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right. You
I
got
mean,
both the parks. You got Fenway and Wrigley. Holy cow.
yep, yep. So, yeah. So I did the internship, and then just happened that I found out about this job in Chicago. I called up Bob Iback. You know Bob.
Mm-hmm.
And Bob said, "Well, we're going to hire somebody by the end of the week." This was like on Wednesday, or Tuesday or Wednesday, and he's like, "Yeah, I got to make a decision by Friday." And he had this candidate already, uh, a young woman that had been with the Pirates, I think. And he's like, "Yeah, but if you get out here, I'll, we can do an interview." And I was like, "Okay." And I bought a ticket on a Greyhound bus. I got on the bus and I went to Chicago.
And you got the job.
Sort of Wrigley Field, got the job.
Got the job right there that day.
I did because I took the bus overnight. I got there on Friday
Wow.
morning. I interviewed like all day because I had, I was like, they interviewed me in the morning. They took me to lunch, interviewed me in the afternoon. And I think it was just because I was just so tired. I just basically said to Bob, "Listen, if you're going to hire me, you need to tell me before Sunday because Sunday I'm going to get on the bus and go back. And I'm pretty sure if I go back, my dad's not going to let me come back." Because, we're a very tight knit family.
Yeah, right.
And I'm going all the way out to Chicago. And Bob called me Saturday morning and said, "The job is yours." So I didn't go back. I literally
Holy moly.
I worked the whole week and then took the bus back, got my car, loaded it up, and then drove back to Chicago. But I
You're like a
worked the
minor
whole
league
week.
ball player. You got the bus is waiting for me, Bob. So if it's leaving Sunday, and tell me if I'm on the team or not, man. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, that's
Yeah,
what went down.
Buses are
Yeah,
like this
buses,
right.
buses, right? No more. That
Yeah.
story can't be told anymore, Sharon.
Yeah.
It's no longer you. Wow, and you're writing a book one day, aren't you? Seriously.
Yeah, I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know?
I don't know. Why,
Well,
it's
think
like,
about that one. Seriously, think
yeah,
about. You got a story that's pretty powerful, very powerful, and just the leaps that you made. Now, did you just decide like sports management was that new too?
yeah, when I started, I actually I wanted to be a female broadcaster. So UMass had a journalism program,
Okay.
and so I figured I need to be a sports writer, sports broadcaster, and like my junior year, they did away with the program, and they basically said, "We're now going to have an undergraduate sport management program." And they gave me the opportunity to transfer into that. So I was part of the first graduating class of the undergraduate program
Wow.
at UMass, and I think Miami of Ohio were
Hey, that's where I went. Yeah.
the first two to have graduate programs, right? They were the first two to have graduate programs. The first one with an undergraduate was UMass. So I was part of that class.
Very
And
cool.
I basically was a phys ed major. I'm like, well, kind of a phys ed major, but um, they're like, take all these marketing classes and whatever. And the next thing you know, I'm a sport management major. So,
So
and then
that made you think like, okay, now now I got to go to baseball teams or football teams. Is that was the next step then?
well, I didn't feel like it. Well, it just happened. You talk about like life paths,
Right.
but the internship with the Red Sox, that's what like I hadn't even thought about it, right? I was still thinking I could still get into journalism somehow. And then once, you know how it is.
Yeah.
Once I walked into that ballpark, into the front office, I was like, oh, this is the job for me. Right?
Right.
So, you cross that threshold and you're just like, oh, okay, this is a great job. I didn't know there was a job like that until I actually was an intern in the department. I'm like, this is a great job. This is perfect. This combines
Yeah.
journalism because it requires writing.
Hmm.
There's opportunities to do interviews to represent the organization and the team. And I get to watch baseball games. And I did love baseball. Um, and it was just, you know, they're cool jobs.
Yeah, they sure. Yeah, no doubt.
They
Now,
are, you
now,
know.
when you didn't take the bus back, where did you stay? Did they give you a place right away?
No, I randomly had a friend that was that had relocated to Chicago, um, who was an exchange student from the University of Oregon for one semester at UMass, and I found out she was living in Chicago, and I stayed with her. Actually, wore some of her clothes because I had no clothes, and she ended up being a great friend
That,
and
that's
uh,
amazing. That story alone, right there, to actually pivot and to keep pivoting to all these things happen. Like you got a roommate, and now there you go. So
Yep. And you know what? You look at back and you're like, it was all meant to be, right? Because I was disappointed that I didn't get the football job, but then I got the baseball opportunity. And then I think, oh, I was disappointed the Red Sox didn't offer me a job, but Chicago is like the best city in the world, right? I mean, and
yeah,
then to work for the Cubs,
and at Wrigley Field, yeah, no
at
doubt. And did you live
Wrigley
close to the ballpark?
always, always. I always moved around a little bit, to different neighborhoods, but Lakeview, Wrigleyville, Lincoln Park. I always stayed in the hood. I always
And
stayed in the hood.
what's your favorite tavern on the four corners of Wrigley? Or shouldn't you say because they're going to be mad at you if you pick
Oh,
a favorite
well,
one?
I got to be really good friends with Jim Murphy.
Okay,
So he actually became a very dear friend. I mean, I did spend quite a bit of time over there.
right.
But, he was also just a wonderful guy and a big supporter of the organization and
Yeah,
did nice things for people. So that corner, and then kind of after he passed away, um, it's like I ended up kind of moving over to Bernie's,
oh yeah, yeah. That was our place. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, Linda
and
Gilman.
all
Yeah,
the wonderful people at Bernie's,
right,
So,
right.
so
Two good joints right there. Yeah, those are the best right there. Yeah, you said it.
you felt like you had another family, right? They're
Yeah.
like extensions of the
Oh,
ballpark.
Linda. Yeah, Linda's phenomenal, and yeah, and then Beth took over
Uh,
Murphy's, and both of them just unbelievable what they did there. The
yeah.
two, yeah, the two ladies that really control Wrigley, two corners of it, right?
Well, I spent a lot of time there, but
Yes, yes,
like
makes sense.
it's across the street, right?
Yeah,
You're like you walk out your door of your office, and then you just walk in, and there's all these wonderful people that are there. Again, there's always this great dynamic, with people who are the season ticket holders and the big fans of the team that would just be in the neighborhood. So you
right.
got to know a lot of the characters.
Oh,
There's so many characters,
oh
right?
God, yeah. So many,
Doors.
so many around the ballpark, in the ball, yeah, everywhere. Like you said, I mean, now we go to '84. You talked about '84, and I want to just jump there. Right, was '84 harder than 2003? Which was the harder one to deal with?
2003 to
Ooh,
me was
why?
harder. In 84 to me was really special because I was only there. It was my second season,
Right,
really.
right, right.
So I was number 3 person on the totem pole, and
Mm,
I wasn't as in. I mean, I got to travel with the team, which was a big deal,
right.
right? And it was exciting because it had been since what 1945.
Yeah,
There was a lot going on, um, and it was heartbreaking. But there was that hope for the next year. There was a lot of hope for the next year because most of those guys were still going
yeah,
to be
yeah,
around.
yeah.
You know, And as you recall, 95 was or 85 was very disappointing.
Yeah.
But it was it was exciting. It was, I see a lot of the photos that people have posted on, Facebook recently of the clinching on the anniversary date.
Yeah.
And, you know, there was, it was just really cool and special. And it was, the way it ended was disappointing, of course.
Right.
If you recall, we had to give up home field advantage because we didn't have.
Yeah. I talked to Bobby De Niro about that. Yeah. That's awful.
Which wasn't fair.
Wasn't fair. Would have won that third game if it's at home, no doubt. They
Yep.
played it during the day anyway, so it doesn't even make any sense for the lights. Yeah.
Right.
Nothing
Yeah,
makes
there's a
sense
lot of
about that.
justice there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But again, it just kind of was so exciting because it hadn't happened in so long, and there was so much hope for the next season. And then, look at 2003 and all that went with that, Steve Bartman.
Yeah.
And,
how did you deal with that? How were you where were you in that as far as dealing with the PR on that?
Well, obviously, there was a lot going on with that. There
Mhm.
was security issues for him. He was getting death threats. We
Yeah.
had to
Crazy.
we put him in the Wrigley Field jail to
Oh, you
protect him.
did? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you know, after we got him out of the park and home, and there was all, obviously the season's over, and there was a lot, still the death threats. And I remember Andy McPhail um asked me to reach out to him, and Andy was just like, um see if you can get him, and I want to talk to him. And it basically is like, I just wanted him to know that we don't blame him.
Right. Right.
It wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
And we don't want him thinking that. And we want the press to know that. And we want, we want the guy to be safe. And it wasn't his fault, right?
No.
How many things could have happened?
Every person was going for that ball in that area anyway. He had to, and first of all, I always say this: those seats in that corner, that they're not those are hard to see. That who's coming? The left fielder, Moises, coming towards him. It was kind of hard to see that out because you're looking towards home plate, right? And so, yeah.
Yep. I did end up tracking him down. I called. He worked for an accounting firm, I believe, and I called the accounting firm, and then they're like, "Well, he doesn't work here," and I'm telling him who I am, and they're like, "Well, we don't believe you. Give us a number. We'll call you back."
Oh, man.
and then from there, I got to his sister, and then finally we were able to connect Steve Bartman with Andy, and they had a conversation. But
Wow.
we had the champagne out. We had the trophy house. The plastic was up over the lockers. I mean, trying to, and we had to break that down really fast. Really fast. We had to break that down. And then we were like, well, there's one more night. And then, it just, it's just heartbreaking because I believe Dusty should have had his World Series then, right? He had his World Series then. And I stayed in the game. You know how it is in the game. You want that ring. And it doesn't matter if you're a player or a coach, but if you're invested and you're in the game long enough, and the front office people, we all want that ring.
Yeah.
Right?
Of course.
What it represents. And I stuck around hoping for that ring. And then after 2006, Dusty's leaving, Andy's leaving. It was just like, I'm not going to see that ring anytime soon, I don't think. And you're ready for a different challenge. And
yeah.
It's gonna
That's tough. That's tough because that same year, remember the Cubs had my dad's jersey in the dugout because he went back to Arizona to get operation for his bladder cancer, and so he missed the playoffs then. But we were all watching it together, and you guys even called him and said because the surgery got delayed that he was actually going to throw the first pitch out for the World Series because he could have came back for that before his surgery. and that was sad, right? That
Yep.
so, for
So
so many, and you're right in the thick of that. And yeah, I see why 2003. Yeah, makes sense.
yeah, and also at that point, for me, I was the director for I don't know how many years at that
Yeah.
point,
Hmm.
and you're really invested, right? You're
Yep.
invested in a whole different way.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm glad I left because it wasn't until 2016 that they finally won the
Yeah.
World Series,
Yeah.
right? It's another 10 years.
Right.
And in that 10 years, I got to go and have a whole other amazing experience working for NBC Universal, um, having an office in 30 Rock, getting to be the publicist on Saturday Night Live,
There you
and
go.
working with Jimmy Fallon on his show and all these other, amazing experiences that I got to have. So, I don't feel bad that I didn't get the ring. Somebody, forgot who it was, said, we could order it for you. I think they were making that offer for a lot of people that used to
Yeah.
work there.
Right.
And if you want to pay for it,
Yeah.
you can order the thing. And I declined because I wasn't there and I'm not invested in it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have meaning. And people are like, yeah, but you invested all this up. And I said, no, no. I said, it's not my ring. So I don't want it.
But if they gave you a ring, you would take it. I get it. You make that doesn't make sense that you would have to pay for that. I don't. I mean, everything that
Oh,
you did.
even if they gave it, if they gave it to you, of course, you're not going to say
Yeah,
no,
you're
but
not gonna. Yeah, of course, of
it
course.
doesn't have the same,
No,
you know,
I get
meaning.
it, but it's still a mention that what you have done for the organization. Because yeah, it makes sense. Because I think about my dad when you talk about the ring, right? And just thinking about you too. Like that's yeah, all you guys are feeling that pain. Like his maybe go back a little further, but still, you got half your life there. You know,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
you're working like and that's a huge thing. I mean, so yeah, I think about that like, boy, that would have been something special, him
Yep.
coming back there to Wrigley and then playing in the World Series. But hey, it didn't go that way. Now let me ask you about Sammy, because in a way of, you then became working for Sammy. Now, did they make you go full time with Sammy? Not they. You're the head of the department. But what was the choice of that? It seemed like you were. Did you switch over at a certain time because he hit superstar status? Tell me about that.
It was more like in 1998, obviously, with the race for the record.
Yeah.
And if you recall, 94 things weren't good with I forgot if it was a strike or a lockout or
No, that was a
both.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah.
Oh, it was just
Trouble.
bad.
Hmm.
And remember we had the replacement
Yeah.
players, and it just was bad. And the fans were angry at the owners, fans were angry at the players. The game kind of was sputtering a little bit after 94. And here comes this opportunity in 1998 with Sammy and Mark McGuire that engages interest in baseball and people who aren't baseball fans.
Right.
Kind of like so many people were interested in it. And so and it just was bringing the game back, the interest back. People were, feeling better about the game, how exciting this is. Sammy's so affable and just so, full of life, and people
Yeah.
just, well, like the Pied Pipers, people just loved him and wanted, him to do well. And then Mark was more stoic and different personality. And so I think baseball saw the importance of taking advantage of this. And so Andy basically said to me, Andy McPhail, he's like, hey, listen, he's like, this is really important to baseball and the commissioner, that this race for the record, we do whatever we can to promote it, support Sammy and all this. So he's just like, here, you can bring an extra person on the road trip with you so you can take care of Sammy and
Mm,
all his and all this. And so it just really kind of revolved into the fact that there was so much attention on
right.
Sammy that and I had a great relationship with Sammy,
Yeah, of
and
course.
that, I spent a lot of my time managing that. Because from a press, when you're doing media relations, it's about the press, right? A lot of it. And there was still so much press interest in Sammy. for all those years after
Yeah.
98,
Mm-hmm.
and some of it, not necessarily good. If, there was the cork bat,
Yeah. Towards the end. Yeah. Right.
well, there was those things as well, but most of it was all, positive and great. And, Sammy did a lot philanthropically
Yeah.
and really gave back to his community and to Chicago. And so, I'm a big supporter. I feel Sammy belongs in the Hall of Fame. I will tell anybody who asks that because he does. And
Yeah, he was a superstar. There's no doubt. And
he helped the game of baseball.
yeah, there's no. I don't know if there's been one at the Cubs since like him. And I was able to, when I did a doc, to be around that too and see and feel what you're just talking about. He really was affable and just always had a smile. Hey, how you doing?
Yep.
My dad loved him. So
and he loved your dad.
yeah,
He loved Lonnie.
yeah.
Yep.
So it's unfortunate how it ended. And that's what happens when the guys that have gone that far, they got to come back down, unfortunately, right? And sometimes it's forced against you. I mean, my dad had to go through a lot of stuff, in his career with Don Young and a lot of stuff that you just, when you're out there and you're passionate, and you're a face, there's going to be good things, but there's also going to be thrown a lot of crap your way. So,
Right.
yeah, but you were in the thick of that, man. I mean, like, wow, that had to be something to experience that home run chase in 98 up close like you did.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And one of the other jobs Andy gave me was when we were on the road trips. When we were at home at Wrigley Field, the security people were in charge of getting the balls back. If they
Right.
were home runs, and then kind of negotiating the return of the ball. And then when we were on the road, that was my job. So I had to go and the the road team
Wow.
would get the ball for me, obviously, from their security, and
Yeah.
then it was my job to negotiate it back for the Cubs.
Really?
So I had some, and I wasn't supposed to spend any money. So there's like no money. Like
Is
do
this
what you
bats and balls going back to him?
bats and balls, and you
Yeah.
want to go down on the field. What can we do? What experience can we give you?
Yeah.
But we're not going to exchange any hard cash. So that really honed my negotiating skills because I did get them all back. It wasn't easy because one of the people it was San Diego, and that was a very was it 60 maybe.
Yeah, I think and I was there because at San Diego I always go down and visit you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it was number 60, and the gentleman that got the ball was from Mexico. Oh, and he had a very pregnant wife, and he didn't speak English, and so we had a translator, and he wanted us to pay for his wife to have the baby. So I had to go from, we're not paying for your wife to have the baby, to you can sell these items that I'm going to give to you and use the money to pay for the baby. I can't give you the money to pay for the baby.
Right.
But that was difficult because there she's sitting there, like 9 months.
Oh my God.
So bad because obviously you needed the money, but yeah.
Did he give it to? Did you get it back?
Oh yeah, we got. Oh, we got every ball back.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
we got
what if he says though? No, I'm going to put it on. Did they even have could he put it on eBay? Yeah. Then I mean, no.
No, this was 98.
No, I don't think so. So they couldn't go and no. Okay.
Nowadays, nobody's giving you the ball.
No,
back,
there's no way. There's no way. Not a 60.
No.
Yeah.
Any of them, nobody's going to give it to you because.
So you had to get out there early. Here we go. We got some bats for. We got some balls. You want to mitt? You want to? Yeah. Before you get a lawyer.
But we got them all back. Yeah. Yeah, it was a great year. You know what? I can say,
fun.
Just like you were part of history with all these things with your dad, I got to be part of history.
Yeah, you sure did. Yeah.
Right?
Oh, God.
So,
yeah.
I mean, when you think back, I mean, I got to be there when the lights went on at Wrigley Field.
You did.
Right? I got to be there when they were actually using the helicopters to bring the lights in to install them, which was amazing to watch.
Yeah.
You look
So
back and you're like,
so much. And one last thing I want to add, Ned Coletti, because I want to bring on, because my dad loved Ned, and you talked about Ned. I've heard you talk. He was a special guy for you. That you know, one of those
oh,
guys that kind of, I'm not going to say, but mentored you. Is that
yeah,
correct?
Ned was a mentor, a friend. It was interesting with Bob and Ned. I never, like, within working with them, ever felt like I'm being discriminated against because I'm a woman. Like, they forgot I was a girl, right? They just forgot and they just let me do my job. They gave me responsibility without thought of, like, oh, she needs to go in the clubhouse. She's going to go on the road. So, I mean, they championed me at a time when, that wasn't happening
Right,
for
right, right.
in sports to work in front offices. It wasn't. So I
You're
feel
right.
very I had those two, both Bob and Ned, and I just saw Ned. Ned and I are both friends with Peter Chivarelli, who's the manager of the band Chicago,
Uh-huh.
and Ned lives out here in Arizona, and so we were both backstage at the Chicago concert last month and end of August. So I got to hang out with him, and we just
Yeah, that
talked about the four Cubs. We just had it's just like, like when you see people that you haven't seen in 10
yeah,
years, although I see Ned more
right.
regularly, you just pick up where you left off.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And my dad,
And
like, yeah, I could tell by how you talked about him, and I got to know Ned a little bit too. My dad loved him, and obviously it takes a special person to understand. Right? It all you on your path too. It's like there's got to be some good people that come along and are there at the right timing. Don't you believe in someone who can go down that path that you went, but you've got to be able to maintain and get through all of it, because it just seems so hard. Those jobs are so hard, right? And everyone's fighting for them, and you just did it from day one, and that's why you got to start penning the book. And while you're waiting for that next exciting thing to come, seriously, Sharon, you got some stories and just what you pioneered, in the business, because I one of my dear friends is majoring in my dear friend's daughter I grew up with is majoring in sports management, and so is my nephew Spence.
yeah. Oh yeah,
So yeah, and so but they both have that heart that you would like, and
yeah.
one day I'd love for her to call you and just for 15 minutes just ask you some questions if that's all right. Yeah.
I'd be happy to do that. I do that very frequently. I'm happy to talk to people,
Oh, that's cool.
young women, because
Yeah.
hey, things change. They've changed so dramatically, which is amazing. And with the growth of women's sports, the whole front office and the opportunities for women are just amazing. But again, these are cool jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much competition for them. When I started, there wasn't a lot of competition because you know the staffs were pretty small.
Yep.
People
Yeah.
in the job their whole life.
Right.
Um, and so, we were just the beginning of the influx of people with sport management degrees. Now, so many schools have these programs. I've talked to people who have like 3 and 4 internships, really good internships, and they can't find jobs. It's just such a competitive landscape,
Yeah, there
right?
it goes. Yeah, just
Uh,
yeah. You open you walked through that door, and you were part of that whole opening. And now it's like it's way different than when you walked through that door or busted through the door, whatever you want to call it.
the opportunities themselves are better for women because they don't have to fight for the opportunities, but
Right.
because there's limited number of jobs, there are only so many jobs, and there's so many people that want those jobs that there's a lot of competition and a lot of wonderful candidates for jobs. So I'm personally glad I'm not trying to find a job in the industry now. because-
Right. Well, you already did it. Yeah, you did that part, but that part that you did, that's why I said like that style that you came up with, that was all because it didn't happen before. And like you're probably saying, that you probably wouldn't have that certain style today. Who knows? It's just you just said, I don't care. And I heard you played rugby in like college or something. Is that true?
Yep, I played rugby.
Well, there you go. There's the toughness. You're like, no one's going to get in front of me. I'm just going to, carry the football, which my wife and I loved watching the rugby in the Olympics, the women's rugby too.
Oh, wasn't that amazing?
So cool.
When I played, it was still like, not a big deal. It was a sport. But we had a combined team because I went to school in the Amherst, Massachusetts area. So there's a number of colleges. So collectively, they all were able to put a rugby team together with all of these, schools contributing people. And, now look at it. It's an Olympic sport.
Yeah, right. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing how far you have come. Yeah, there's no doubt. Yeah. Last thing I want to ask you, did you ever meet Pete Rose?
I did a long time ago.
You did? What was that like?
He's one of a kind. He's one of a kind. I'm sorry, but I also feel like he belongs in the Hall of Fame.
He'll get in now. I think he'll get in now because if you think about it, he had to, he did lie about, and again, he was, I say this, he is the Babe Ruth of base hits. There's no doubt. No, he was Charlie Hutt. There was no one more engaged in a baseball game than Pete Rose. He like fouled the ball everywhere, even in the catcher's glove, right? It was like, he was so cool to watch. And I got to say though, but him not coming clean on that, he had to with all the situation with being the number one rule. But now I think he served his life sentence. Now they got to put him in.
I hope so. I feel like he'll know that he gets in just like your dad knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think for his family and.
Yeah, I agree. He deserves it now. He served his time.
He's an icon. You look at him and I don't know. I get emotional thinking about it because he really was a decent guy. And
he was
now
Mr.
you
Baseball,
look at
man, in his own way.
The whole gambling and sports thing, but it's almost hypocritical. Like let the guy go. He served his time, as you said, and he belongs in there because you got to look at it.
I think they're going to let him in now. They said a lifetime ban, right? Well, his life is over, so put him in.
I like how you're thinking. Yeah. And I'm going to say one last thing before we go, because when I was thinking about talking to you today, I just had this memory pop up about your dad. So, charter on the airplanes, and I got a sweet tooth. I always keep, snacks packed. And your dad knew this. And he always knew where to find my box of ho-hos. The Hostess ho-hos?
Yeah.
I have them in my bag with my computer and stuff in it. And, I'd leave it on the seat on the plane. I'd get up to talk to somebody. I'd come back and there'd be ho-hos missing. And I'd be looking around because, your dad liked to have them if he needed some extra sugar.
Right.
And I'd turn around and there'd be a wrapper on the seat. And he didn't even try to hide it, and he just kind of looked at it.
That's awesome.
I can't look at a ho-ho without seeing.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh, my God.
Can't look at a ho-ho without thinking about Ron.
That's beautiful. Wow. Sharon, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun.
It was. It's awesome. And good luck. What's next? Like I said, you need to go. You need to go there. You're going to have to face that because it's a story that you have to tell. It's a beautiful one, and it's full of a lot of grit and guts and everything, man, that people want to read about. There's no longer that path anymore, and that's a lot of things. My dad's the golden era of baseball is long gone, right? But so you got to tell those stories. Keep them alive.
Well, I'm glad you're telling stories on your podcast.
Well, thank you. Appreciate
thanks for having me as a guest.
You got it. I'll see you soon in Arizona for sure. Okay.
Right around the corner. Literally.
Yeah.
We've got a World Series to have first, but then it's right around the corner.
There you go. We always look forward to it, right? It's awesome. Yeah. The baseball life. You got it. All right, Sharon.
Okay.
Take care. That was awesome.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
This Santo moment is brought to you by Onesti Entertainment. In the winter of 1968, Ron Santo would play handball at the Division Street YMCA to get into condition for the 1969 baseball season. He went from 206 to 195, dropping 11 pounds of winter weight. That Santoid was brought to you by Onesti Entertainment.
crackerjack.
This call is being recorded.
Hello, David.
Can you hear me?
Hey, how you doing? You are my crackerjack call for this episode. Yeah? Yes, you are, man. I got to say, David, thank you for sending me your book, which is amazing. The Baseball Hall of Fame, A Fan's Perspective. I mean, wow, it's epic. Just the analysis, and it's an almanac. I mean, the work you did for this. Tell me about it, how it started.
Okay, well, it started like this. I was a big fan of your dad's, Tommy John's, and a gentleman that I met as a little boy, but I didn't realize I knew him until he was on Ken Burns' baseball, Buck O'Neill. I saw your dad and Buck for years, wait for the Hall of Fame to come, and it never came until both of them passed, which actually kind of burned me, because to see the joy in their eyes, especially your dad's, because I grew up with your dad. I actually met your dad once when I was 8 or 9 years old with my grandfather. So a friend of mine and I were talking about who's not in the Hall of Fame that should be. And the first person, we said it at the exact same time, Tommy John. So I looked him up, and Tommy wasn't in there. George made a comment, why don't you see if you can look Tommy up and, get his permission. So by the grace of God, I looked up on the internet, and I found Tommy's number and called him.
Ha!
He wasn't in, left a message. He called me back, and I got his permission. Well, what was ironic is I've tried looking his number up, even though I've got it set aside, I haven't been able to find it again. And then a real good friend of mine ran into you and started talking to you, and you were gracious enough to give her, or she gave you my number, and you called me. And it's like all the stars aligned to do something that I really wanted to do. So the book is actually about the people that should be in the Hall of Fame that aren't. But it was actually contrived because I saw your dad's look in his eyes, and Buck O'Neill's and Tommy's. And I've had numerous conversations with Tommy and his lovely wife, Cheryl, since then. And when I called you, when I talked to you, you gave me permission to use your dad. And I really appreciate that. So that's...
Well, yeah, you wrote me a wonderful letter, and it's just amazing what you have done. Just for people that are listening, I mean, you have done so much work, and all the ball players that aren't in, that are in the cusp, you do a breakdown on their life and career and what they've done and what they've been known for, and a statistical breakdown on each of the players, and just going through my dad's stuff that you wrote down, man. I mean, there's still things like I just am baffled, like especially with today's ball players who are barely, only a few hit 300, and a guy like my dad who was a power hitter, hit 300 more than 4 times and 30 home runs more than 4 times. But at the same time, he was playing third base better than anyone in the league, and definitely right there with Brooks Robinson. And also you had some good factors here about, his walks and how he led the league in walks 4 seasons, and how, his on base percentage he led twice, and just games played, led twice. So he was out there every day, and I just realized, like, what you kind of said that maybe the writers, baseball Hall of Fame writers missed. They didn't look at his on base, his walks, and his defense. That's what you kind of said there.
Right. Your dad was an overall ball player. He was a great fielder. What I didn't point out was your dad played in the pitcher's era. Yep. As a matter of fact, that they lowered the pitching mound to kind of even it out after Bob Gibson had a 1.12 ERA.
Right.
So what I tried to do is, our game is about 160 years old. Okay, instead of players being voted in based on writers' opinions, I put together some charts that are statistically accurate for the entire game. And I broke it down, and I did it all on my own. And if somebody from the Hall of Fame wanted to sit down with me, that'd be great. But there's certain people that should have to forego the voting in. They should just, after their 5th year of being retired, should be inducted and not have to be elected. To me, the election process is too cumbersome and biased, to be quite frank. Your dad was he was a great announcer. Buck O'Neill was one of the best announcers and representatives of the game. Tommy John, to this day, they still name the surgery after him. And until Tommy had the surgery, everybody that ever had that type of injury had to quit. And he should be.
Yeah, there's let me what I wanted to say is that what you're getting at too is there's the statistic here that I didn't realize this was he had in MLB history. He was the only third baseman in MLB history to post 8 consecutive seasons with over 90 runs batted in.
Yep.
God, that's the part, like in that era, and then to be overlooked at third base. And I noticed too, just going through your stats, that, and I even looked it up, that my dad won 5 Gold Gloves, and you mentioned that. And I'm sticking with my dad because he's my dad, and that's how we met. You featured him in here with Tommy and a few others, and then you go through all the other players that are on the cusp. But I just, getting back to him, it's strange, like how he won these 5 Gold Gloves, but every year after that, up to 1973, he still led in assists. He still led in total chances, and didn't win the Gold Glove like I saw that Doug Radar did. The rooster from Houston, but my dad still surpassed him even in field percentage. So there almost was kind of like Brooks got the Gold Glove every year in the American League, and maybe they just didn't. Why didn't he get it, in 69 and 70 and 71, 72, 73 when he started passing Eddie Matthews and broke all his records for total assists and total chances and total double plays. But he was setting the record every year individually, then totaled up to beat Eddie Matthews and surpassed him, and then Mike Schmidt being the only one that broke my dad's records. It's just amazing to see like how much how well he performed at third base being his son, and I found that out more doing his documentary, but also, reading you have in here and I remember this, 1980, he didn't get 5% of the vote to even be back on the ballot. I mean, That's crazy.
It was. It shows the bias. If the Cubs would have gone to a World Series, especially 69, I remember the year like it was yesterday. Okay, your dad would have been a first-time ballot Hall of Famer. But
unfortunately,
a lot of writers figured, well, they had Ernie Banks, they had Billy Williams, they had Fergie Jenkins, but they didn't. I mean, they were Hall of Fame inductees. Your dad was every bit as good as them, and your dad was a class act. I remember. Yeah. It always made me smile after a Cubs win in '69. Your dad jumping up and kicking his heels. Actually, he got
a lot of flack for that. That could be one of the reasons why he's not in. But the thing is, though, Dave, it's I think about my dad now, and back in 1980 when he didn't get 5%. And I'm just a high school junior, and I'm thinking like I'm thinking about it now, going, that had to be heartbreaking for him to know that he didn't even get to 5%. And he doesn't show us that, but I could just the constant misery he had to go with, just kind of being validated for the type of ball player he was, is you really feel this in what you put together, and brings me back to really thinking about how my dad had to just plow through a lot of that stuff and accept his fate.
Which led to the name of the book, The Baseball Hall of Fame, A Fan's Perspective. Okay?
Yeah.
I want to see people like your dad in there. The ones that, blue collar.
No, but he should have been.
Yeah. He should have been able to give his own speech.
Yeah.
Let the fans see the look and pride in his eyes. That would have meant
whose fault is that, though, the way you're saying? Like, the Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame, so it's, the writers thing has been going on forever. What new? I mean, they did put up the Veterans Committee to finally get him in, which was the right committee. It took a few stabs to get it right, to get like his own era to look at him closely, and then he got the majority, the 90%. I think only one guy didn't.
I think the whole baseball voting needs to be revamped. It includes a statistical analysis where if you're, like right now, I'll just use Albert Pujols.
Right.
Did he really have voted in? No. He should be inducted. Why waste the time voting him in because you're taking it away from somebody like Ed?
Right. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It's thing, but what gets you in? Like, you got to be the top guy at your position for a decade. I mean, what's the numbers that get you in? I know Albert is a total shoe-in. I get those guys. I get Ernie Banks, Albert, Pujols. I get the guys that are, you don't even think about it, they're in. But the guys like my dad, what makes them go in if you don't have a voting system?
Statistical categories. There are 17 statistical categories that I put together. You get certain points for that. If you lead the league like your dad did in games, in the year, he gets 2 points. If he wins an MVP, he gets 7 points. It's based on 110 points. Once you get 110 Hall of Fame points, now that covers post game statistics. That covers Hall of Fame statistics, MVP statistics, All-Star games, Golden Gloves.
Right.
It's fair for everybody because we'll use Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith never would have made it out of hitting alone, but he won 18 consecutive Gold Gloves.
Right.
The Golden Glove, like your dad, is worth 3 points in my statistical analysis. That's what counted for 15 of your dad's points.
Right.
It covers and the same amount of categories are for pitchers as well. And
I like
pitching,
that. Yeah.
Pitching is a game right now that's really changed. Old-time guys used to get the complete games. Saves weren't a big issue. They were usually the fringe ball players. But now the game has changed so much, you have to have statistical analysis. As a fan, I give a rat's patootie if somebody has a launch angle of 33 degrees or has a exit velocity of 110. I really don't care. Did he get a hit? Did he get driving runs? Did he get home runs?
Right.
So that's how I broke down the statistics to the baseball. I call them the baseball card statistics from when we grew up.
No doubt. And you look at those RBI cards that my dad was always on those. He was on the home run cards. He was on, and then you're looking at 4 times hitting over 300. You look at the averages today, and no way are any of these modern day ball players, but maybe Ohtani, but he might not even have the time in the league to even get the stats up. Yearly he could be like a Sandy Koufax, but these guys don't have the consistency to even have Hall of Fame numbers like were in the past. Yeah.
No, they don't.
So you got to change it. You got to change it. There's no doubt because
that's right.
The game has changed. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think you're right because I think that you're talking about that the writers, are subjective. So if the writer doesn't like a player for whatever kind of reason, he's from New York and doesn't like Chicago. Who knows? Or my dad had a bit of a passionate player, so
Your dad was a great player. He was honestly he's somebody that I went to watch. Okay, I mean, and I've been involved with baseball since I was 7 years old. My grandfather knew Buck O'Neill. That's how I went to my first Cubs game. In '66, and it was people like now. You go to games, players, they want money. Okay, if you want my autograph, it's going to cost you $50. Your dad would go out of his way to sign a young kid's.
Yeah, no doubt.
And that's what the game is going to implode in itself if they don't change it. Especially the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame should be like a Disneyland experience. It should be a one and done. You go there for 2 or 3 days, and that's it. You should be able to spend a week there because there's so much to look at.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like it has changed so much, and if they did have a breakdown of this, you're right. You look at the Cubs didn't make the playoffs back then. It was hard to get in, and You know, they missed it in 69 when the league changed and they had two divisions. But, you know, if my dad did get in the World Series, he's probably getting in. So that's a factor against him, which shouldn't be because it's team sport and a lot harder to get in the playoffs back when he played. But you look at guys like, you know, Pete Rose and, you know, that team with Cincinnati, those guys did it. They won, but they were a lot like the Cubs, but they won, you know, and a lot of those guys got in. Not that, like Rose isn't in, but let's talk about. Go ahead.
Tony Perez. Your dad was every bit as good or better than Tony Perez. He didn't play as long as he did. He didn't have the DH, you know, but his numbers were very similar. And he beat out Tony Perez many times in fielding, you know. But he was in. Nobody ever questioned him. But your dad...
Well, they wanted... That was a beast of a team. But Perez was... yeah. What was it? Perez played first base, though.
No, he played third base in the 60s.
Did he play most of third base? Yeah.
Yes, in the 60s he did.
Yeah.
And your dad was every bit as good as him. He beat him out in all-star games and whatnot. You know, and I'm not taking anything away from Tony Perez because he was a great ball player.
No. Yeah.
But he was almost a first-timer. He took about 3 or 4 years. But your dad should have been at least 20 years earlier than he was. And it should have been when he was 5, you know. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm glad that...
Yeah, it's a tough one, man. And but I'm glad you're doing it for other ball players too. It's amazing, man. Thank you, Dave, for sending that to me. And we'll be talking in the future here, man. And I hope Tommy gets in this winter, right? That's the vote this winter?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because,
all right, man.
You take care, Jeff. Thank you so much.
All right, you too, Dave. Talk to you soon. All right. Bye now. This podcast is brought to you by Bernie's Tap and Grill. It's family-owned and operated since 1954. Located across from Wrigley Field on Clark and Waveland. My dad hit a few home runs on the Waveland Avenue, and Bernie's was my dad's favorite place to go. It's got delicious food, 4 full-service bars, an awesome beer garden, a sidewalk patio cafe, and a cool upstairs area. It's the place I've always met my friends at before and after games. Go on by and tell Linda Dillman Jeff Santo sent you. Bernie's Tap and Grill, where you go when you go to Wrigley.
Thanks for listening to our show. Special thanks to our cool crackerjacks, Scott Nelson, Jim McCauley, Debbie Foley, Sherry Matarisi, Terry O'Brien, Gary Tallman, Anne-Marie Prescule, Jim Yoschlegel, Liz Rutherford, and Mac McPhillamy.
This show is made possible because of them and all our subscribers. If you want to support the show and be a cool crackerjack yourself, subscribe to our Patreon page. Click the link below this episode or go to the Patreon tab on our website, www.peanutspopcornandcrackerjacks.com.
Our long-term cool crackerjacks get a members-only t-shirt, so sign up now to be part of the club. To get notified of the next episode, click the follow button or sign up on Patreon for free.
And leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify.
And don't hesitate to write. Give us suggestions. Tell us how you're liking the show. Email jeff.ppcpodcast@gmail.com.
For my closing quote, I'd walk through hell in a gasoline suit to play baseball. Pete Rose.
Toodaloo. This Old Cub, the documentary about former 9-time All-Star third baseman, broadcaster, and Chicago Cubs legend Ron Santo and his lifelong battle with diabetes. Santo was the first major league position player to play professional baseball with type 1 diabetes insulin dependent. This Old Cub captures the spirit of a man and his will to achieve. Santo is the ultimate optimist and therefore the ultimate Cub. Buy the DVD at santofilms.com. We also have t-shirts and other merchandise. Go to santofilms.com or santofilms.bigcartel.com.